Hello, welcome to Mystery in Middle Grade. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in May. I have quite a stack and we have some really good ones, so let's turn the page and get started. First, I'm going to just briefly mention the books that I read while I was on vacation. I did create a separate video that introduces these, so I'm only going to review them very quickly for you. First, I read on audio The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown, and this is the newest in the Robert Langdon series. If you've read the others, starting with the Da Vinci Code, you may be interested in picking up this one. Next was a book called Five by Alona Bannister. This has been really popular recently. It is kind of a thriller, but very heavy on characterization. So I really liked it, and I think that you might too. Next, we read a book called The World's Greatest Detective and Her Just Okay Assistant, which has a great title. The text is not quite as glib as the title is, but it does really represent the kind of fun elements of the book, which I really enjoyed. And this was a 5-star read for me. Next, I read Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This book is a few years old, and it's a thriller where a woman kind of goes back in a time loop, back previous days and years, to try to stop a terrible event that happens involving her 18-year-old son. And then I also read a middle grade book called The Last Chance. It's in the Last Chance Academy series. It's called A Study in Secrets by Debbie Machiko Florence. And this book I really enjoyed. It was nominated for the Juvenile Edgar Awards, and I wanted to pick it up and give it a try. I will be picking up the second one, which is coming out soon, and that one does continue on from this one, just so that you know. It's not quite a standalone, and I did really enjoy that one. So with that short review, let's move on to the other titles that I read. I decided to start a new cozy mystery series. This is number 1 in the Noodle Shop Mysteries by Vivian Chen. And in this book, Lana Lee is a waitress at her parents' noodle shop. She doesn't really want this job, but she's in between her own opportunities. And after she makes a food delivery of dumplings to the strip mall manager, the man dies because he has a shrimp allergy, and they were shrimp dumplings. Her shop knows not to give him shrimp dumplings, and so she's very concerned that this may not have been an accident, and she needs to figure out what happened. The reputation of their shop is online, and she wants to get to the bottom of it. So in the process, she interacts with the police detective, who of course is annoyed by her, but also somewhat charmed, and I think we'll see more to the relationship as the series goes on. There are now 13 in this series. I did enjoy it well enough that I will at some point pick up the next one. Next, I read a very short book called Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. Now, this is a unique story set on an interstellar ship that is going off into space for generations, and so they've developed a way of preserving people's personalities and memories so that people really don't have to die. They can kind of store their personality and memories and then be uploaded again into a new body. Now, it happens that Dorothy Gentleman, who is a ship's detective, is unexpectedly called back from her storage. They're stored in a library. They get to preserve themselves in a kind of a book. That's kind of a unique, fun atmosphere. But the ship calls her back from that because there's a mystery that needs to be solved. There is been a murder. And so she is unexpectedly kind of dumped into a nearby body because she was in between bodies when she was stored there. And so she is going about the ship, and people think that she's this other person. And this other person just happens to have some kind of foot in the door of getting to know people who were involved in this murder that has happened. It was fun, it was unique, it was unusual. It's going to be the first in a planned series. I don't know that I loved the ship's detective and the actual mystery enough to continue on with the series, but who knows? They're very short. It was only, I think, 2 hours on audio, and so it's very easy to zip in and zip out, and so we'll see if I pick up the next one or not. Next, I read a book called Imposter by L.J. Ross. Now, L.J. Ross is a best-selling author in England, but her books are just now being published in the United States. So this is the first one I've picked up by her. This is the first one in one of her series starring Alexander Gregory, who is a forensic psychologist. He works with criminals, and he is now working in an institution with a set of patients with long-term goals with them, and he's called out to a village or a town that's had a crime that the local police cannot solve. And so he doesn't really want to do this. He used to be part of a team of profilers, and that team was disbanded, and so now he doesn't necessarily feel like he wants to be doing this anymore, but he is called back in and he responds to that call. Now, in this story was quick, it was easy to read. I did find that some of the elements were predictable to me. And I don't know if that's gonna be true for the other ones in our series, but I probably didn't love it enough to continue. But it may just be for you. The detective has an interesting background of his own, and this story does delve into that a little bit. That is something that I do enjoy, as you see the characters kind of develop in their own personalities and circumstances over the course of a series. So you might be interested in trying this one out if you're interested in mystery books that focus on the forensic psychology profiling side of things. She does have some other series as well, so you could try a different one. This is, as I said, just newly being published in the US, so this first one's out now, and it looks like they're gonna be releasing them over like every 3 months or so. So they will be coming out really quickly, so you'll be able to read them fast if you are looking for something that you can just dive in and get into a whole series. My next book was a fun one, which you can tell by the cover illustration. She's kind of peeking through a keyhole there. This one's called History Lessons by Zoe E. Walbrick, and this is a debut. It's pretty cozy, I would say. Not completely in the cozy genre, but adjacent. So Daphne Overture is a new professor at a university, and one of her colleagues is found murdered, and she is unexpectedly pulled into the investigation because of some circumstances that are happening. She didn't know him very well, but she is getting insight on him from other people in the university community, and she's interacting with the detective and most especially with a civilian who used to be a cop but has been called back in to work on the case. He currently owns an old bookstore. So she's very interested in the bookstore, and it's nice to have this kind of cozy mystery with the sassy black protagonist. She does have an appearance by her mother and her father. They are kind of one-dimensional characters, I would say. And also her friend group are a little more one-dimensional. So we have a bunch of hail flying down, so I don't know if you can hear that on camera or not. But anyway, her friends, she has one friend who has a foul mouth, and other than that, the book, I would say, is pretty clean, and so I didn't appreciate that, and I don't think it was needed in the story. but I just wanted you to be aware. But other than that, it was a delightful read, and I will be looking forward to picking up another book in this series when it comes out. Next is a debut called How to Get Away with Murder by Rebecca Phillipson. Now, in this book, D.I. Samantha Hansen is newly returning to her job after taking a break from having kind of a mental health issue that happened at work. And so she's very kind of nervous about starting back to work and what people are going to think about her abilities. But she feels a need to work on this case because a young teen girl was found murdered. And the most important clue at the crime scene was that she was carrying a copy of a book called How to Get Away with Murder. The book is written by a man who, it turns out it's a pseudonym, and they don't know who really wrote it, but it has a lot of kind of real life advice about how the police detectives work, how to skirt around those issues so that you're not leaving evidence at the crimes, and how to set things up in such a way that you won't get caught, and so on. And those chapters from that book are here in this story presented in alternate chapters. So in a way, you are spending time in the killer's mind. I don't necessarily like that too much, but in this book it's offset by those chapters being slightly snarky, and so they're a little bit of a light-hearted tone that makes it not so dark. And the stuff that he presents is really kind of stuff that people already know from reading mystery books, like make sure you wear gloves and blah blah blah. So the main character feels like she needs to track down who this author is, and then that is going to unlock this case. She's not the lead detective, so she's also working in the parameters of the police hierarchy, and whether she is going to step on other people's toes with her choices, whether she has to fall in line with what other people want her to be doing, that's kind of part of the story as well. I did enjoy this story. It was unique and fun to read. I didn't so much like the big twist. It's gonna have a big twist, and I have to say that wasn't my favorite aspect of the book. But it was well done, and I'm interested to see what this author comes up with next, because it definitely did fulfill its promise on being a page turner. Then I read a second book in the Jane Wonderly series. This is Murder at Wedgefield Manor by Erica Ruth Neubauer. Now, the first one I read a number of years ago. That one was set in Egypt. Jane is a young widow who was traveling in Egypt with her aunt and another traveling companion. In this story is a follow-up. It's the same group, but they're not in Egypt in this one. Here they're in an English manor. They're staying with a friend, an old friend of her aunt, while they are on their way back to America because they are Americans. So this is set in England in 1926. Jane is spending time taking flying lessons, and her aunt doesn't really approve of this because she wants her to be a proper lady, but Jane has already been through those expectations with her first marriage, and she just wants to be able to make her own choices now. So she continues with her flying lessons, and when a mechanic on the estate is killed in an automobile accident and some of the circumstances seem a little fishy, she decides she's going to investigate. Of course, the perhaps romantic interest from the first book, Mr. Redverse, does show up here, and he's kind of an enigmatic character. We don't know his background, we don't know what his job is. He's obviously some kind of detective or investigator, But he shows up at the manor and becomes another guest at the manor, and the two of them pair up to help solve what is happening at this English manor. So it was fun. It's a cozy mystery, and we like to see a spunky female heroine who has her own mind about things, and I really look forward to reading more in this series as they go on. Next, I read a new release by Jane Harper called Last One Out. I've been reading Jane Harper for years now, and she does have a mini series where she has the same detective in two of her books. The first one is The Dry, and the second one I can't remember the name of, but it's a follow-up to that one with the same detective. However, since then, her books have been standalones, and this is another standalone. This one is set in a small Australian town that is dying. Most of the residents have sold their properties to the nearby mining company that's been trying to get everybody to sell. And the people who are left are determined to stay because this is their place. Our main character, Ro, is a grieving mom. She has come back to the town because 5 years ago, her 21-year-old son went missing on his birthday. He went out to an area where there are some abandoned houses that did have some connection to the family. And after that, they don't know what happened to him. He was never seen since. So they are grieving. She and her husband have separated. She's been living in Sydney, and her husband has stayed. He grew up in this town. He feels part of the community in a way that she didn't, although her best friend also lives in the town. So they have a couple families that are close and that still live there. Now, this has the mystery elements of what happened to her son, Sam. Her daughter, who's now a young adult, is also in the story and plays a small role in uncovering some additional clues that Ro follows. Even so, the mystery is not the heart of this story. If you've read Jane Harper before, you know how important the setting is. The setting is always almost like another character. You can smell it and feel it. You know what it's like to live there. You know what the air feels like. You know what the community is like, what the people are like, how they treat each other, interact. You know what kind of soil there is. She's just very descriptive, but not in a way that is paragraphs of descriptive text. It's all woven into the story, and the same thing with her characters. So really she's just a master of setting. So you read her for her overall effect of the stories, for the setting and the characterization and the slow unfolding of what are kind of non-traditional mysteries. In this case, there aren't really police involved at all until things are happening towards the end of the book. Ro is really just looking into things on her own, and she feels very kind of isolated. So it's a very moody book. I really enjoyed it, and if you're a Jane Harper fan, you know. And if you're not read Jane Harper yet, what are you waiting for? Give it a try. You could start with any of them. The Dry is, again, one that I would recommend, but because most of them are standalones, you can't go wrong with any of them. Here we go. I read Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke, and I have some opinions. Now, if you are aware of opinions and comments in the book influencer world, whether on YouTube or Bookstagram or whatever, you will know that there have been a lot of people who have some negative ideas about this book. It's gotten very mixed reception. Now, I'm on Substack. You can find my book reviews on mystery and middle grade on Substack as well. And on Substack, a number of people have written very, very well described articles about their problems with this book, and I'm gonna say that I line up with their opinions. I am on kind of the didn't like it end of the mixed reception spectrum, and just to give you a little background in case you haven't heard of this book, this is about Natalie. She is a modern trad wife influencer. So she has a important channel that's making her lots of money. It's how her family is making a lot of their money, and she wants to show homesteading and doing everything by hand and baking her own bread and all of that. And her underpinning for her reasons for doing this is supposedly religious. She was grown up in kind of a religious household. However, as a Christian myself, I found it very unsatisfying. That part of her life was undeveloped. A lot of her reactions and behaviors were not believable to me as stemming from a religious motivation. So I had a big problem with that. And then the big part of the story is that she wakes up one day and she finds herself in 1885, like living really as a homesteader. And everything is kind of crazy. She doesn't know what's happened. She can't understand what's going on. And she stays in that period of time for quite a while. It's not just like a momentary thing. But the book does shift back and forth from the current day, and it shows how she built up her life and career and that other timeline in the back. And I have to say, it just didn't work for me. And the resolution especially just didn't work for me. So if you're curious, it's a great book for a book club because you're gonna get a lot of talk from people who really liked it, people who maybe didn't like it so much. There are people who really, really have loved this book, and it's been very, very popular. It's been a bestseller. It's gonna be turned into a movie with Anne Hathaway. And so if you want to get on the bandwagon and see what it's all about, I wouldn't discourage you. But keep your eyes open for catching some things in the story and make your own opinions about whether that appeals to you or does not. Next, I read The Unselected Journals of Emma N. Lyon, only the first one, by Beth Brower. This is a series, I believe there's 8 of them out now. They're short, they're sweet, they're easy to read, one after another in order. I wanted to spread them out a little bit, so I haven't gone on to number 2 yet, but I enjoyed it just as much as everyone else. I kind of thought that, well, maybe it could be a little too sweet for me, but it turns out it was not. So these are set in an 1883 London neighborhood called St. Crispian's, and our main character, Emma, is she's a new adult, so she has been under guardianship, and she is now able to stand for herself, but the house that she has inherited is being lived in by kind of a terrible cousin, Archibald, who has been in control of her finances, and he is just horrible. And she, as this story goes on, has to figure out how to manage this, because it's been stipulated in the will that she inherits the house, but he has a right to live in it. So some way she's gonna have to make sure that they can get along, but at the same time, she has to make sure that she is standing up for herself. And so it's just delightful. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next in her life, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes along with number 2. But number 1 was a 5-star for me. Next, I'm gonna shift over to middle grade. The first one was really short and sweet, Star Stories by Kate DiCamillo. This is the 3rd book and the final one in the Orris and Trimble series. Orris and Trimble are a pair of friends who are a barn owl and a mouse, or a rat, I can't remember. And they, in the first book, make friends, and the second book, have an adventure, and this one wraps it up. And they are just delightful. They are for early chapter book readers. So they are for not middle grade exactly. But Kate DiCamillo is a star author, and so these are so easy to read and just charming. Kate has won the Newbery Medal twice, and so I just trust what she is putting out, and I have just found this series to be delightful. Next, I read another first book in a series. This one's Phoenix by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. Kimberly Brubaker Bradley has also been awarded by the Newbery Committee with 2 Newbery honors for her previous books. And in this one, this is a slim series. They're pretty short. This is the first one. The series is going to be called Ride On. This first one's called Phoenix. And in here we have a girl called Harper. She is moved with her mother away from her hometown out into a countryside area. And they're renting a small house on a horse stable riding lesson farm. But Harper's not interested in horses. She doesn't want to be there. She's upset at her parents' divorce. She's upset at the situation that's happening. She's upset at her former best friend, and she does not want to like it here. And she does not want to like the horses, and she has some attitude. So she is not just a happy-go-lucky, go along with everything kind of character. We get some moodiness. She's definitely opinionated. She is definitely a person who knows her own mind, but she also keeps a lot inside. She keeps a lot of her feelings inside. And so her mom doesn't necessarily know all the things that are going on. And then one day, a situation happens where a very old, sick, broken down horse is left in the yard here when there aren't any other adults around, and Harper says that she's going to keep the horse, and she makes the delivery people sign over to her that she can own this horse, because this horse was just going to I think be killed with some other sick horses. The adults, her mother and the riding instructor, are dubious because it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of money, and they try to talk her out of it. And so Harper is just going to be determined that this is what she's going to take on. And so you see this story going on about a girl falling in love with a horse. And you know, the other stories are also going to be, it seems, horse-related stories. And so it's going to really appeal to those horse-loving readers. We know that they're out there, and just all middle grade readers who want a really good story with a character who is determined to make her own way, make her own decisions, and yet has some stuff that she's holding on to, and she still has to deal with it. So she's not a perfect character, and we get to see her grow and learn even in this small short story. Next, I read Some of Us Are Brave by Sadi Faruqi. This is a story of 4 children. It leads up to the Hurricane Harvey. And these 4 children are caught up in a situation. They have to band together to help themselves through the hurricane that they get caught in. Now, Mona is feeling very in charge of her younger brother, Omar. Their parents are gone on a work trip, and they've left them in the care of a neighbor who makes sure they go to school and have something to eat. But otherwise, they're not really being parented. And she is taking care of her little brother and taking him to soccer camp. This is over the summer. And while there, Omar's kind of coach is one of the other main characters of the story, which is Yasser. Yasser is very serious about soccer. These are all middle school students. He wants to be the captain of the soccer team in the next school year, and he is working with the younger children at this soccer camp. Now, there's another boy, Cody. He's the current soccer captain. And so the 2 of them, Yasser and Cody, don't see eye to eye, but the 4 of them have to work together. It's really the 3 older kids have to work together to survive the bad situation that happens with the hurricane. And I really did think that this was a good story. My only quibble with it is that every single character has something in their past or background that's a stumbling block to them, and every single character learns something. And not just these main characters, but even the adult characters, they all kind of learn something how to be better people. And I thought that was slightly didactic in a way that wasn't quite realistic enough for me. However, if you're looking past that, then it is a really good kind of survival-ish story with these characters, and it does alternate between their points of view. Okay, the next book I read was Otter by Catherine Applegate. This is a story in verse, so it reads very quickly, and it does have some illustrations scattered throughout, so that's fun. In this case, the main character is an otter named Otter, and she is a rescue, and she's been released out into the ocean, but she has to be rescued again. And so this is kind of the story of what she remembers about her experiences in her life, and how she feels about being in the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and how she feels about being out in the ocean, and what the wild otters feel about those that are living in the aquarium. It was delightful. Otter's voice was sweet and fun. You really feel you get the animal's point of view, but in a way that is very accessible to people. And she was, Catherine Applegate was inspired by the Monterey Bay Aquarium in real life and their rescue otter program. So I highly recommend this one. It's a backlist title, so it should be easy to find, and otters are my favorite wild animal, and so this one was just a delight for me. Next, I read Amari and the Metalwork Menace, which is the fourth book in the Amari Peters series by B.B. Alston. I have read the other two of the other three recently and spoke about them on a previous video. I read the third one this year and the fourth one, but I also read the second one because I needed to refresh my memory before reading number 3. And I have to say, I think I've enjoyed number 4 the most since I read the first one when it first came out a number of years ago. So I do highly recommend it. In this, Amari is still traumatized by the events that ended the previous book. And so she wants to quit working at the Bureau of Magical Affairs. She goes there every summer and she participates in their junior agent program. She doesn't want to do that anymore. She wants to leave the magical world behind her and just be a regular kid. However, she receives a notice that she either has to retire for good and never be part of it again, or she has to agree to come back. And she's determined she's going to retire for good until she learns that there is a curse that is making people ill. And what it's doing is, in the magical world, what it's doing is it's turning parts of their body into machinery. And so some people are able to get along with just maybe their leg has turned to metal, and they can continue on with their regular work, whereas other people are so affected that they have to be hospitalized, and they may get so sick that they may not be able to live anymore. So Mari goes back to help. She feels like she has to help figure out how to solve this problem. And to do so, she finds she has to work with a previous nemesis of hers. And can she trust this person? Can they figure out what's at the bottom of this problem? Well, you'll have to read the books to find out. But I do highly recommend it. You do want to start with number 1 and work your way through. There are references to things that happened before that you would miss out on if you don't know all that back history. Next, I read Red River Rose by Carol Lindstrom. Now, when I was reading this book, it reminded me a lot of the Little House on the Prairie series. This girl, Rose, she lives in the Canadian I don't know if it's a prairie, but in the Canadian country in 1885. She is of the Métis people. The Métis people, or indigenous people who have a history in their ancestry of being mixed Native and Europeans. So her family is of the Métis people, and they have lived here for generations. Now the Canadian government wants to come in and make them move off of the land. This is based on real history that happened. And Carol's the author, Rose is determined to do what she can to help her people maintain their land by standing against the government soldiers who are coming towards the town. So she comes up with a plan and wants to execute it. She is a spunky character. She is an outdoors girl. She uses those skills in her plan. She has some friends who help her, but it's really a child-led effort here, even though it's tackling an adult problem. So we see their actions, we see all the buildup, we get to know her really well as a character. I did wish that there was more explanation and background of the Métis people and the problems with the Canadian government, because this is all historical information, and I do wish that had been built more into the story. I did a little bit of my own research afterwards, which I think a lot of readers are not going to do. So that would be my only quibble about this book. Otherwise, it was a really nice read. I did enjoy it. Last, we have, I don't know if you can see the title because it's shiny, but The Midwatch Institute for Wayward Girls by Judith Russell. Now, this was a fun book. I picked this one up again because it was on the list of the Edgar Award nominees for juvenile mysteries. It did not win, but it was super fun. The main character, Maggie Fishbone, is an orphan. She's always been an orphan, and the orphanage she lives at is done with her. She's caused enough trouble, and they're not gonna put up with her anymore, and so they marched her, I think she's on a ship actually, so they get her over to where this school for wayward girls is, and when they get there, it's all dark and dim, and the students at the school are marching by and wearing dreary robes and looking gloomy, and there's an organ music playing very gloomy music, and Maggie just thinks this is gonna be horrible. And her person who brought her there is delighted because this is exactly the kind of place that she thinks Maggie belongs. And then as soon as the other orphanage lady leaves, everything breaks out in happiness and party, and the organ music changes to happiness, and it turns out this is a secret school for girls. They're training girls to investigate criminals, and so they're teaching them classes like hiding and knot tying and safe breaking and so on, and there's pictures in here that are fun. There's also stuff, there's a little book in here, an additional book within a book, Useful Things Every Girl Should Know. This one's How to Create a Disguise. There's one on Morse code. There's one on making a chocolate cake, and so on. And all of these are presented in such a way that they're going to be useful for them when they're acting as spies or detectives. Now, the story really takes a dramatic and unexpected turn as it goes on. So there's just a lot of fun around every corner in this, including secret passageways and escape doors and all of their attempts to act like proper little ladies who don't like school whenever an inspector comes by. So it was just funny. It was funny. It was laugh out loud. And just enjoyable. So I recommend this one, The Wayward Girl, The Midnight. I'm sorry, I can't do this title. I recommend this one, The Midwatch Institute for Wayward Girls. And that concludes all the books I read this month. It was a really good month for me for reading. I had a lot of fun. There were a lot of mysteries. I had 7 middle grades, and it was just a great month. I hope you come back to visit Mystery in Middle Grade. Feel free to leave comments and visit my Substack as well.